Although commonplace here and in many countries, some Americans who live outside of California are unfamiliar with the concept of lane splitting. Anytime I post a video depicting the act, I will invariably get some ignorant comments about how awful it is and how much of a death wish I must have. So I wanted to take some time to discuss why those people are wrong. All of the footage I've got here was just captured on one day on a normal ride to meet some buddies in Los Angeles. For the uninitiated, lane splitting is when a motorcyclist rides their bike between cars on the road. Some people will differentiate between lane splitting and lane filtering, which is pretty much the same, but it's moving between stopped traffic as opposed to moving traffic. Whatever your opinion on either practice, you can't deny the plain legality of it here. I would know, I'm an attorney. Though the law is poorly written and vague, California Vehicle Code Section 21658.1 defines lane splitting as driving a motorcycle between rows of stopped or moving vehicles in the same lane, including on both divided and undivided streets, roads, and highways. Although lane splitting was never prohibited by California law and people have been doing it for decades, it was made explicitly legal in 2016. In fact, when highway vigilantes take it into their own hands to impede a lane splitting motorcycle by maybe opening their doors or just blocking them with their car, they actually could be committing a felony or two. Of course, other traffic laws will still apply. You can't ride on the shoulder, you can't speed. There is debate about riding on the HOV lane markings. That's the carpool lane. It's technically illegal to ride on that double yellow line, but CHP does it all the time. I have, on several occasions, followed them on those lines myself. Although I think we can all agree the Highway Patrol has never really been a great role model for following traffic safety rules. It's also legal in many other countries. In many European countries, very few of them actually restrict the practice nationwide. Germany is one of the only countries that does, and they still allow lane filtering. In Australia, several of the most populous states allow lane splitting. You don't even need to ask about Asia or much of the developing world, where motorcycles make up a significantly larger portion of the traffic patterns. It's easy to see why people want a lane split too. According to a 2012 Belgian study, replacing just 10% of the cars on the road with motorcycles that were allowed to lane split, that reduced overall carbon emissions by 6% and time stuck in traffic by a massive 63% for everyone, car drivers included. Intuitively, taking advantage of the much smaller footprint of a motorcycle allows for more people to travel using the same space. The lack of start-stop traffic on a bike improves traffic flow and, most importantly, motorcyclist safety. For several reasons, there's a real dearth of information regarding motorcyclist safety and lane splitting, but what we do have is fairly consistent. The most comprehensive study out there, the HURT report, was published in the early 80s, so it's a little old, but the data is probably still fairly relevant according to most sources. The HURT report provides that lane splitting can be safer than riding in traffic if practiced with caution regarding speed. Injuries were less severe in accidents with lane splitting motorcycles and no more common, but riders were obviously less likely to be rear-ended and more likely to be sideswiped. If you're in between cars, they aren't going to hit you from behind, but they might turn in front of you. More recently, there was a 2015 American study at UC Berkeley which mirrors a lot of the findings in the HURT report. Their conclusion likewise was that lane splitting was a, quote, relatively safe motorcycle riding strategy, with some caveats regarding total speed and speed differential with traffic around the bike. That study also found that, quote, lane splitting motorcyclists were also injured much less frequently during their collisions. Lane splitting riders were less likely to suffer head injury, almost half as likely, torso injury, 19% versus 29%, extreme injury, it's actually pretty close, 60% versus 66%, and fatal injury. That's also much less likely when lane splitting, 1.2% versus 3% of accidents studied. Lane splitting motorcyclists were equally likely to suffer neck injury compared with non-lane splitting motorcyclists. And I know I'm talking a lot about data, but that's how I make my decisions when I ride. Feel free to make your own. In all the data we have, the most important predictor for collision outcomes is speed differential. The difference between the speed you're going on your bike versus the cars around you. Motorcyclists who lane split at high speeds in an unsafe condition, weaving in and out in wet conditions, for example, they are in greater danger, obviously. Personally, I believe most of the bias against legalization of lane splitting arises out of the actions of these bikers who don't follow the law and split way too fast to be safe. The California Motorcyclist Safety Program states, with respect to possible law enforcement action, keep in mind that it will be up to the discretion of the law enforcement officer to determine if riding behavior while lane splitting is or was safe and prudent. Basically, lane splitting is legal, but doing it recklessly can still net you legal trouble. There are too many bikers out there splitting lanes around curves, riding on the shoulder, splitting between trucks and RVs, and generally making unsound decisions when riding. This scares some drivers and makes us all look bad. As somebody who commuted 20,000 Los Angeles miles on my bike last year, personally, I know if I can keep my cool and use my head when I'm splitting lanes, I'll be significantly safer for it. Safer than them, and safer than just sitting in traffic like a car on a bike. Generally, I try to follow the conclusions of the UC Berkeley study when splitting. Never split lanes at more than 50 miles an hour. That sounds like a high number, but the more important number is never splitting lanes more than 15 miles an hour faster than the traffic around me. I wear my gear. I'm not going to get into an argument about it. I like full gear. I'm not listening to music while I'm splitting lanes. I assume that every driver is on their phone, and often they are, and they won't see me. They don't. Sometimes they do see you and will just drive into you either way. So you gotta be ready. People don't signal or look before they change lanes. That's on the biker to predict and avoid as best as you can. You can have the right of way and still be dead. As an attorney, I can thank my motorcycle for always getting me to court on time, no matter how bad the traffic gets in LA. As a realist, I know my safety is more important than having that right of way and getting there 5 seconds sooner. I've saved myself countless hours and tons of gas by splitting lanes. I could not live somewhere without it, to be honest. Too many people in the US see motorcycles as toys because there's no point using it to commute where they are. In California and many other countries, however, the ability to lane split makes riding and owning a motorcycle make a lot more sense. You can do your own cost-benefit analysis on that. For me, I'm going to continue riding, I'm going to continue lane splitting and lane filtering. Of course, there are going to be a lot of people who think this is reckless still. That is your opinion, but not based on reality or fact. If you want to have a discussion in the comments, that's fine, I do encourage that, but ignorance is not a good conversation starter. You can ride recklessly whether you're lane splitting or not. You can ride dangerously and hurt yourself whether you lane split or not. That it is scary to some drivers because they don't expect you to be there really has no bearing on whether it is safer or not. The data doesn't lie. It is safer. And in fact, in a state like California or in countries where it's legal, drivers do expect them to be there. They aren't surprised by it, and it's not the end of the world. Real-world, factual data aside, there's something intensely freeing and satisfying about being first off the line on your motorcycle on every red light. I wish everybody could experience this. Yes, it does require some care, but look at this. I'm going in between these cars. It's pretty tight. I'm weaving around, making sure my mirrors don't hit their mirrors. I won't fit between this VW and this Subaru, so I wait. But most of the time, it's a really nice way to get to the front. Ride safe, guys.